Hi folks, and welcome to today's session. In this recording, we're going to discuss the F1 assessment. Okay, so just before we get into the actual questions, just a bit of background information. Please make sure that you check the due date for the F1. It will be handed in. It is an assignment, and you will be handing it online. Many of you will be familiar with this because last year already in first year we began to use Call Campus. So this is an assignment. It will be done online. And then also in conjunction with this recording, please make sure you refer to the recording aligned to this, which deals with the aspect of referencing and plagiarism. As I mentioned in that recording, please don't forget that in second year, the plagiarism penalty is minus 50%. Okay, so it's quite a jump from first year. And also another thing that you have to bear in mind is that you are now in second year and we are at NQF level 7. No, sorry, third year is NQF level 7. We are at NQF level 6, whereas in first year you were at NQF level 5. So what this means is that the requirements in second year from your assignment are higher. You have to be more rigorous in the research that you conduct, the critical analysis, etc. So naturally, it's going to be marked stricter than what you were marked last year because we are at a higher NQF level. Okay, so please bear that in mind. Just purely giving back theory as part of an assignment answer is really not going to get you to pass because this is an assignment. You have the textbook, you have all the resources, and if your answers are just purely theoretical, that's one of the big reasons why people have lower marks. Plagiarism issues. Okay, so I'm going to guide you today in this recording as to what is required of you at second year level, or rather NQF level 6 in terms of your assignments. Okay, so this is the first assignment for the year for this course. It is a little bit scary, etc., but I'm here to help you and to walk you through it. So when you get into Call Campus, you'll be able to download this brief as well as a article, and you need to look at the article in conjunction with the questions. Okay. So first of all, what's required of you is you can see that the article talks about the structure and the function, workings, etc. of a radio station. When you open that article, you'll see they talk about the roles of the operations manager, etc. in the radio station. They also talk about the roles of the presenters, etc. Okay, so what you want to do before you actually delve into these questions is you want to understand the workings of a radio station. So you may conduct further research about how a radio station comes together, how all the elements, people who work in the technical side, people who work as newscasters, people who put articles together, who do the scheduling, how does it all come together? So you might want to do further research, or remember, we have our own radio station at Boston Media House. It's called Boston Media House Radio. If you know somebody from there, you want to talk to them. But you basically want to get a firm grip and a firm understanding before you get into the assignment of how a radio station operates. Okay? So please don't leave things for the last minute. What you want to do is get ahead, get your research going. I know from the briefing date, you get like 5 weeks to hand in an assignment. Start getting going, getting your background research done, etc. You'll make your life a lot easier. Okay, so question 1 for 15 marks. Now you'll get used to the way I work. You'll see that I create detailed rubrics for each answer. So if you just scroll down, let's do that now. If you just scroll down, you'll see question 1, what is required to achieve excellence? Okay, so I like to advise students to use the rubric as a checklist. So you've put your answer together, go back and see if you have met the requirements as per the rubric. Okay, purely theoretical answers will get you in the range of 0 to 5 marks, which is not a pass. So you have to show application to the radio station context. All right, so refer to the article and explain what is meant by operations management and discuss why operations management is important at a radio station. Now, what you're going to do is you'll refer to the prescribed textbook. So this year we are using a new textbook from what we used last year. You should all have a copy of this textbook. And in the introductory chapters, a lot is mentioned and explained about what is meant by operations management. And, you know, the textbook gives you lots of examples as well. So what you could do is reference the prescribed textbook. Once again, please don't take chunks word for word from the textbook, because that will give you a plagiarism penalty, as you will see that I've discussed in the other recording where I discuss the referencing and plagiarism issues. So you could possibly begin by, you know, explaining what is meant by operations management. Use the prescribed textbook. You can use other sources and make sure you reference it. And then the second part is very important. Why is it important at a radio station? So once again, in the introductory chapters, there's quite a lot of discussion in the prescribed textbook about why operations management is important. So I'll give an example. You know, one of the reasons is that operations management is important to make sure everything functions as a whole and, you know, everything happens as it should. Now, for example, in a radio station, you know, they have a clock. So they break the hour up into what they call their scheduling clock, I think it is. And they say, right, the first 5 minutes, we're going to have adverts. The second 10 minutes of the hour, we're going to have, you know, allow people to phone in. The third 10 minutes, we're going to have a guest speaker, etc. So why is operations management important? You'd have to give me specific examples from the radio station context. So if the operations are not managed, then you'll have chaos. And remember, in radio, you're not supposed to have any silence. Okay, so you've got, when people tune into their radio, throughout the time that the radio is on, they need to be hearing something, whether it's a discussion, whether it's an advert, whether it's music. And so operations management ensures, in a nutshell, that any entity, whether it's Boston Media House, whether it's Pick and Pay, they function you know, optimally and efficiently and as they should. Okay, so as I said, this is where your research on how a radio station works will come in, because you'll be able to give me specific examples of why it's important in a radio station. Please don't give me purely theoretical answers. As I said before, it's second year NQF level 6. You have to show more depth of analysis. Okay. Right, then question 2 says, discuss the role of the operations manager. Okay, so here you can do a little bit more research. You can speak to, if you know somebody at Boston, a radio station, if you know people at other radio stations, or you can just, you know, Google the different radio stations, and then they probably have profiles of the radio station manager. So now, what is the role of the operations manager? So what is the job responsibilities, and what is the everyday duties? So an operations manager, for example, has to make sure that everything runs on schedule. They have to make sure that, you know, the day ahead or the week ahead, the schedule is adequately planned. It's done in a way that it meets the needs of the target audience. So for example, BMH radio has a very different target audience to that of 702. Okay, so the role of the operations manager requires you to do, excuse me, folks, a little bit of research into the workings of a radio station. Okay, and then how does the operations manager bring you know, with the various different people, like I said, the DJs, the people who work on the, you know, in the background, on the IT, that sort of thing all together. Okay, so now we get into a little bit of theory, hard theory. The textbook discusses the input-output or transformation process. So if you look at, just give me a second to open the page in my textbook. Okay, so on in chapter 1, let me just get back in front of the screen. It might affect the sound if I'm not. Sorry about that. Okay, so in chapter 1, on page 11, we have figure 1.4. Now, all of these, if you're sitting there and you're watching this briefing session before we've gotten to all of this work, don't panic. Each week we will systematically work through each of these theoretical elements, these chapters. We'll do examples, we'll do discussions, etc. So all of this will be covered as part of our either, you know, Zoom recording or live Zoom sessions. So figure 1.4 talks about the transformation process. In a nutshell, the transformation process is when you have certain inputs and then transformation happens and you have outputs. So if we take a very simple example, I'm a big fan of Simba chips, as you will get to know me during the course of this year. Some of the favorite things that I like to enjoy are junk foods. I love cupcakes. I love Simba chips. When I get home in the evening after a long day of lecturing, because I work at quite a few different institutions, it's me and my snacks and my Netflix. Okay, so Simba chips is one of my preferred snacking items. So Simba takes potatoes and they take flavorings as inputs, and then they transform it. So they fry those potatoes, they cut them, and then they spice them, and they cut them into fancy shapes, either crinkle cut or, you know, all of those different offerings. And then they put them into either big bags or small bags. And then the output is a snack that I pick up in the Pick and Pay or Woolworths or wherever, and I enjoy as part of my leisure time. So the input-output transformation process doesn't only apply to goods, it can also apply to the radio industry. So what inputs are they using? Like somebody's using potatoes and oil and flavorings, and then what's coming out on the other side. So in the radio industry, you know, you've got DJs who are taking, I don't know much about DJing, so forgive me here. They're taking various tunes and they're composing it and they're making a song with a nice beat, for example. You know, the radio station is taking stories and news and adverts and they're producing a show. So, you know, for example, 702 used to have the Eusebius Makaiser show. I also like to listen to the Azania Musaka show in the afternoons if I'm in the car. Okay, so what are the inputs that are going in? What is happening? And then at the end, you're having a radio station which is producing offerings like different shows. Sometimes radio stations also produce radio dramas, etc. Okay, so what we want there is basically for you to apply. The operative word here is apply. Apply the transformation process. So that theory, you've got to now take it and say, well, how does it relate to and how can I apply it in the context of the radio station industry? Okay. The next section then talks about the importance of quality, speed, and flexibility. Now, this theory is covered on page, let me just check that, 29 onwards in chapter 2. So Once again, operations management has to produce quality. So if we take Pick n Pay as an example, Pick n Pay runs it's a massive operation. You know, they've got lots of stores, they have lots of products, and as part of their operations management, they have to make sure they provide quality. Okay, so when I go and buy my fruit, veg, my Simba chips, it's got to be quality. It can't be stale. It can't have gone off. It can't be damaged. Um, Another important element of operations management is speed. So the operations of Pick n Pay have to deliver what's needed speedily. And many of you will remember the panic buying of last year. You know, very few operations could keep up in terms of speed with restocking the shelves with things like toilet paper and tissues and hand sanitizers and perishable foods. So people were buying at such a phenomenal rate that the operations management couldn't keep up in terms of replenishing the shelves fast enough. And then there's the element of flexibility in operations management. So in keeping with the example of, Pick n Pay, they're a massive retailer, they've got to have flexibility in the hours they operate, the products they serve. And one of the very interesting things we've seen come along in the past few months is, firms like retailers have become very flexible. They've opened up new options for shopping, online shopping, delivery to your house, curbside pickup, delivery to a parking bay in your boot. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to explain the importance of quality, speed, and flexibility to a radio station. So once again, don't just tell me quality is this, speed is that, and flexibility is that. Say to me, in a radio station, quality is important. And for example, sound quality. So there's nothing worse than listening to a radio station and it's crackling or it's too soft, or there's a background noise. You're not really going to listen to that radio station. You're going to tune out and find one that's clearer, perhaps. So that may be an example. Again, you'll have to do research. So don't just, go and write your own ideas. You have to, the purpose of assignment is to conduct research and to show that you've actually shown your viewpoint, but you also did conduct research, and, you've evidenced what other sources have to say. Okay, in terms of speed, yeah, breaking news, radio stations have to be on the cutting edge of news, get the latest news to you in time. We've had a lot of presidential broadcasts in the past few months. They have to be able to cross over very quickly and let listeners listen to what the president is saying regarding lockdown, etc. And then flexibility. So it may be that a particular producer has asked for a guest to come online or to come on the radio station at a certain time and speak, and that person can't make it. Now you've got to quickly rework the schedule because you can't leave that slot blank. Okay, so it's these type of examples which you need to relate in terms of quality, speed, and flexibility. Okay, and there I have given you another reminder. Once again, as you work through this, please make sure you do look at the rubric to see exactly what's required and give you a little bit of an indication about what I will look for when I mark your answer. Okay, so then the next question asks you to basically understand the social bottom line concept, which is also covered in the textbook. It's quite a renowned concept, so you can look anywhere and you can look at the social bottom line. So in a nutshell, basically radios, keep society informed. There are many people who cannot afford television sets, who mainly rely on news from the radio. Okay, radio stations during the quiet months in December, January, people who don't have families, for example, they listen to their radios. That's their companion. People who live alone, A lot of the times their companion is the radio. Okay, so I want you to look into the social bottom line and how can radio stations contribute to that? Okay, and then the final question is asking you to distinguish between. So what we mean there is discuss the difference between the top-down and bottom-up strategy. Okay, so the top-down and bottom-up strategy you will find in the chapter on strategy, which is chapter 3. And it's covered from page 58 onwards. Okay, so what is you could begin your answer briefly by explaining and then obviously referencing whichever source you use, what is the difference between a top-down and bottom-up strategy. And then look at the examples in the textbook and then also consult, the Zoom sessions, live or recordings that we will discuss when we get to the section. And that will give you some ideas. So I'm not going to give away too much here. We can discuss later on, and you can share your thoughts and ideas with me on the live Zoom sessions. And then finally, the technical marks. Now remember, as per recording 1, if you have not in-text referenced and you have not given a reference list, then this falls away entirely. And I minus 50% from your total. Now, what we're talking about here is you have reference, you do have in-text, you do have references, but there are errors. So then I mark you down here. Then the other thing that a lot of students don't pay enough care and attention to is proofreading their work prior to hand-in. So a lot of the times I end up with an assignment which is quite incoherent, and I have to keep making circles and saying incoherent, not sure what you're trying to say here. So please do proofread your work, and then of course professional presentation, follow the font size, style, question numbers must correspond to question numbers in the brief, etc. All right, and then you can read through the learning outcomes and have a good read of each of the rubrics. Okay, so folks, that concludes the briefing session for the F1 assignment. Please do take note of the due date, which will be published on the brief that you download. So until next time, chat soon.